My girlfriend of 4 years became someone else's bride. In a fit of anger, I fell in love with her brother. The girlfriend I had for 4 years has since become my sister-in-law. 01. Wedding scene. I drank 3 glasses of white wine and chatted with the man sitting next to me with a thick tongue. Is the bride pretty? My girlfriend. She told me in the early morning, "Baby, I'm going to a wedding today." It turned out to be my wedding. The other person looked at me and didn't say anything, probably thinking I was a psychopath. I smiled bitterly and took another sip of wine. This wine is really bitter. It's even harder than the 3 years I had to carry bricks to support her schooling. When I drank the 4th glass, the bride on the stage saw me. Stunned, shocked, and panicked. However, when I was imagining whether she would abandon the groom and run down the stage to find me, she bit her lip and looked away. The wedding continues. Exchange rings to show loyalty to each other. The master of ceremonies asked her, "Beautiful bride, are you willing to marry the man in front of you, love him, and be loyal to him, whether rich or poor, until death? Are you willing?" On the stage of the wedding hall, the bride slowly looked down at the audience. His eyes met mine, then looked away. She whispered, "I do." I couldn't bear it any longer, so I slammed the table and stood up. Everyone looked at me. 02. I picked up a glass of wine and raised my arm high towards the stage. "Happy wedding to you too." There was an uproar in the audience. There was a lot of cursing all around. I turned a deaf ear to it and just watched the stage quietly. Sydney held the groom's arm tightly and pointed at me with her other hand. "Grant, I don't know him." "Security guard," she exclaimed in a low voice. "This man is drunk. Take him away quickly." As soon as I finished speaking, several hotel security guards quickly walked up to me and asked me to leave. "Fuck you." When I was pushed out of the door, I cursed, turned around and punched the security guard who had just kicked me in the knee in the face. Then, I was dragged by a group of security guards into an alley near the hotel, beaten half to death. 03. I lay on the ground in the alley and couldn't get up for a long time. Pain. My body hurts and my heart hurts too. Sydney and I have been in a relationship for 4 years, and I have supported her for 3 years. When I have no money, I take part-time jobs as a waiter, a food delivery man, or a bricklayer at a construction site. As long as I can make money, I will do any part-time job. After finally making it to graduation, I thought we would finally be together, but in the end, with a phone call, she was found by her wealthy biological parents, recognized her ancestors, and quickly married a man of equal status to hers. For years, and I might as well have a dog. A drizzle started falling from the sky. I staggered to my feet, lit a cigarette, and made a phone call. "Go and get an explanation for your brother. Troy is the boss of the biggest local KTV. He is righteous, has a wide network of contacts, and is well off." In the private room, we talked out the whole story while drinking. This person immediately called a car of people and went to Sydney's house with me. By this time, the wedding should have been over long ago. In the car, Troy drank a lot of wine with me. When people are extremely frustrated, they are most likely to get drunk. When I got off the bus, I walked a little unsteadily. What a fucking loser. With a sigh, Troy brought a group of people and followed me into Sydney's house. Kicked the door open. I went in swearing, "Where's Sydney?" There was only a nanny wearing an apron working in the living room. She was stunned for a while, and under the pressing gaze of Troy and others behind me, she pointed upstairs and whispered, "Turn left upstairs, the first room." I asked Troy to wait with others on the first floor, and I went upstairs alone. "I want to talk to her alone." Troy rubbed his wrist. "Okay. If her husband is here, you can call us and I'll beat that bastard to death." Nodding, I pushed the door open. The room had heavy curtains drawn, making it very dark. My temples suddenly started throbbing. Drawing the curtains in broad daylight, could this couple be getting married now? 04. Without time to think, I walked forward quickly. There is someone under the quilt. Seems to be a man. I got so excited that I threw back the quilt. He is not dressed yet. The curtains had a good light-blocking effect, and the visibility in the room was dim. I was so close that I couldn't even see his face clearly. "Where's Sydney?" I wanted to grab him by the collar, but he was only wearing boxer briefs. I couldn't just grab him by his pants, right? He reacted quickly, pulling up the quilt to cover himself and sitting up. Looked so familiar. I felt so dizzy and heavy that I seemed to have seen him somewhere. Thinking about it more carefully, didn't I see the groom on the stage at the wedding? It's normal that he looks familiar. He looked at me coldly and asked, "Are you here to cause trouble?" "Your mother." I pushed him down on the bed. "Do you know that Sydney is my girlfriend? She's already married to you and she hasn't broken up with me yet." "Oh." The man responded calmly. There was no reaction at all. The man didn't seem annoyed even though I was pressing him. Instead, he pushed me away a little, took out a cigarette from under the pillow and lit it. Lighter button. A little hot. He even raised his eyebrows slightly and asked me, "Wanna smoke? I'll beat you. Don't curse." He interrupted my scolding and said calmly, "I'll give you 10 seconds to think about it. If you don't leave, don't leave." I frowned unhappily. Threatening me? Smoke filled my eyes, making my already dim vision even more blurred. It makes me feel more and more dizzy. He held a cigarette between his fingers and said nonchalantly, "I guess so." I got angry instantly. "Fuck you." 10. He stared at me, even reaching out to flick the ash from his cigarette outside the bed. 9. This guy didn't play by the rules and I was dizzy from drinking, so I was a little confused. 8. 1. He smiled and put out the cigarette in front of me. "There's no time to choose." As he spoke, the man suddenly turned over and pressed me under him. No. My head was getting more and more dizzy, and I felt very dizzy. "What are you doing?" The other party's response sounded above my head. The voice was low and deep. "You." 05. Before I could figure out what was going on, my pants were taken off. It's hard for me to resist this posture. You can't push it open or hit it. I subconsciously tightened my buttocks. "No, buddy. I'm your wife's ex-boyfriend. You don't play with her? Play with me?" The other party seemed to laugh. "Correction. I am not her husband. I'm her brother." Her brother? I was stunned for 2 seconds, and suddenly remembered that after Sydney found her ancestral home, it seemed that she had a biological brother in this wealthy family. And at this point, my drunken dog brain finally remembered 2 things. First, the person behind me doesn't seem to be the groom at the wedding. He is the guy sitting next to me, the one who I pulled his sleeve and told me was my girlfriend's friend. No wonder he looked familiar. Secondly, Troy and I were drunk, and his gang didn't really react. When Sydney gets married, she will definitely go to the bridal chamber in her new home. Why are we going to her parents' home to look for someone? How stupid. Taking a deep breath, I tried my best to stay awake and talk to the other person. "No, man, I got the wrong guy. I'm sorry for lifting your blanket. Just let me go. Okay?" "No." The person behind me was very frugal with his words but very efficient in his actions. The room was dark, and it seemed that some incense was lit, with a faint smell similar to sandalwood. He seemed to have drunk quite a bit of wine, too. I recalled that his eyes weren't very clear when we looked at each other just now. "I gave you a chance. It's you who won't leave." No, he didn't say that if I didn't leave, I would be teased. I was also driven to anger and cursed in hatred. "Are you fucking perverted? My brothers are downstairs. Let me go. It hurts." 06. The room was dim and filled with the scent of sandalwood. I cursed and grumbled and gave up resisting in a daze. "Feel sorry." The man's low voice sounded behind him. He seemed to have regained his sanity, pressed his forehead and sighed. "I couldn't help it." I'm speechless. He pulled up his pants and opened his mouth to curse him, but for a moment he didn't know what to say. "I came here to settle accounts with his sister, but, how shameful." I turned and ran. Troy, this bastard. I was in such a mess upstairs. Why didn't he even make a move? When I went downstairs angrily, Troy was smoking with his brothers on the first floor. The living room was crowded with people and filled with smoke. I couldn't even see Troy's face. "Stop smoking," I yelled. "No, buddy, Why don't you go up? I am embarrassed to say the second half of the sentence. I'm almost being played to death. Troy put out his cigarette, still looking drunk, and walked over to me, hooking my shoulder. Huh, aren't you seeking revenge on that little girl? Troy smiled ambiguously. I heard everything. I brought people down on purpose. I didn't want to disturb you. He patted my shoulder with his fat hand and laughed. Why are you so excited about this kind of thing? I shook off Troy's hand and walked out muffledly. Let's go, let's go. As we walked out of the door, we suddenly ran into a girl. Her makeup was delicate, but her expression was rather sneaky, very unfamiliar. When she saw us, the girl was obviously startled. She shrank to the side and watched us leave quietly. I glanced back and saw that the girl tiptoed into the man's room. Pooh, that scourge. 07. Night. I received a call from Sydney. To be honest, I was still a little nervous before answering the phone. Is she here to ask about her brother? I gritted my teeth and took it. Sydney's sobbing rang in my ears. Damon, I'm downstairs from your house. Let's meet up and talk. Okay? When I heard this, I instantly got angry. Without saying anything, he hung up the phone. This afternoon, I wanted to ask her for an explanation. But now, suddenly I felt it was unnecessary. What does it matter if you have been in love for a few years? The wisest choice is to withdraw in time. Her phone calls kept coming in. Hang up and call again. Perseverance. I don't know when it started raining outside the window. I looked outside and saw Sydney standing downstairs without an umbrella. He was squatting under a street light, huddled up in a ball. Damn, I'm still a little soft-hearted. My house is on the second floor. I opened the window and threw down an umbrella. Sydney quickly stood up and looked at me, a little surprised. Damon, roll. I closed the window. 08. Finally, I went downstairs, because I found out that my dog was lost. Blake. I went downstairs with an umbrella, shouting as I walked. But Sydney stopped him. Blake is with me. She bit her lip tightly and cried. Talk to me and I will send the dog back to you. I took a deep breath, held the umbrella and looked at her. Speak. Sydney cried and said a lot, such as how she had no choice, and how she agreed to the marriage only as a temporary measure to secure her position in her biological parents' home, and that her marriage with the other party was just a formal business marriage. You didn't tell me because you were afraid I wouldn't be able to accept it. She said a lot of things like that while crying, and then begged me for forgiveness. Even though things had come to this point, she was still thinking about reconciliation. But in fact, I had no intention of listening at all. All I can think about is her brother. What happened this afternoon was so shocking to me that it was enough to overturn my 3 views. I still can't recover from it. Sydney was still chattering in my ear, and I couldn't help asking, "What's your brother's name?" Sydney was stunned for a moment, but still responded to me, "Wesley, Wesley." I quietly repeated the name in my mind. That sounds really bad. The scourge. Why are you asking about him? Sydney asked me with red eyes, a little confused and a little inquiring. It's okay. I touched the tip of my nose, which was my reaction when I felt guilty. Just asking casually. Sydney obviously didn't believe it, but she didn't ask any further questions. Damon, we've been together for so many years. Don't you believe me? Does he need to believe you? Along with the sound of the dripping rain, a male voice was heard behind me. I froze. Damn it, this sound. I will never forget it even when I die. As expected, Sydney looked behind me and asked in a puzzled tone, Brother, look back. The man changed into dark casual clothes, had a cold look on his face, and was actually a few centimeters taller than me. My butt fucking hurts when I see that face. He walked up to me and asked, What's your name? I replied in a daze. Damon. He responded, then casually placed his hand on my shoulder and looked at Sydney. Damon, your sister-in-law. 09. I? No, he is so presumptuous. I quickly retorted. At most he's a brother-in-law. How can he become a sister-in-law? When I turned my head, I saw Wesley curling his lips and smiling ambiguously. Sydney looked at Wesley's hand on my shoulder and was stunned for 2 seconds. The sad expression on her face gradually faded away and was replaced by grievance and anger that came from nowhere. She raised her hand and slapped me. Her tone was extremely aggrieved. "Damon, you bastard." But the slap didn't hit me. Was stopped by Wesley. He shook off Sydney's hand and said indifferently, "Since you agreed to get married, just be honest." He didn't say anything else, but the threat was strong. Sydney burst into tears instantly. She looked at me coldly. "Damon, I felt sorry for you, but it turns out you've been hooking up with my brother for a long time. For money, you're really unscrupulous, taking advantage of both men and women." How disgusting! After saying that, she threw the umbrella away, turned around and ran away. I was so angry that I wanted to curse. This woman is really good at turning the tables. If I were a money-grubbing person, I wouldn't have worked part-time to support her for 4 years. Now, she turned around and occupied the moral high ground, accusing me of cheating on her and coming out. She could finally get rid of the psychological burden and be Mrs. Sue with peace of mind. And the dog hasn't been returned to me yet. Feeling confused, I rubbed my hair and went upstairs. But footsteps were heard behind me. I turned to look at him. "What's up?" You say." He was not in a hurry, but took out a cigarette and said, "Let's talk upstairs." This guy refused to listen and followed me upstairs. "Open the door and go in." I wanted to shake him off and close the door quickly, but this man was quick-witted and stopped me. The door almost pinched his hand, and I was so scared that I quickly let go. Wesley just squeezed in. After changing his shoes, Wesley looked around and seemed dissatisfied. "Too small." "What?" I thought I had misheard, so I looked down and saw that my pants were still intact. When I looked up again, I heard Wesley's voice with a smile. "I mean, the house is too small. Let me change your suite." "No need, a 500 square meter single-family house in the city center. Write your name." I'm speechless. He sat on the sofa, leaned back slightly, and looked at me quietly. "I'm sorry about what happened today. Someone tampered with my drink at the wedding, and I was suffering when you came. You offered yourself to me, so I couldn't help myself." His tone was calm, as if he was explaining something to me. I listened in a daze. Was someone tampering with the drinks? When I thought about the girl who sneaked into his room with heavy makeup on when we left, everything seemed to have an answer. It turned out that someone was trying to get to the top by any means necessary, and I ended up getting there by accident. This overwhelming wealth is now mine. My butt was a little sore, so I sat down on the sofa. Wesley tilted his head to look at me. "Have you thought about it?" I lit a cigarette, thinking about what? "Follow me, 200,000 a month." I was choked by the smoke and started coughing. That's so presumptuous. Too presumptuous. But 200,000 a month was really tempting. When I rejected him, I stuttered badly. No, I don't like men, although I like his money." But I still kicked Wesley out of the house. The man didn't get angry. Instead, he snatched the half-smoked cigarette from my hand as he left and handed me a business card, saying, "Call me any time when you figure it out." 10. After Wesley left, I took a cold shower and went to bed. I had a dream all night. Wesley dreamed all night. This dream really hurts my ass. When I got up early to go to work and waited for the traffic light on the sidewalk, I looked at the groups of zombie faces around me and couldn't help but sigh at the mental state of modern workers. Off work. These colorful little cars are so cute. At work. Come on, hit me to death. I finally made it to the company and just sat down when a curious person came over with a cell phone. "Brother, I really feel sorry for you." My colleague Malcolm handed me a cell phone, and it was playing the scene where I stood up to speak at the wedding yesterday and was dragged out by security and beaten. He patted my shoulder and sighed. You can imagine how frustrating it is for us men. Our girlfriends run away with other men, and we get beaten half to death at the wedding." He said that he felt sorry for me, but his tone was sarcastic. Seeing that I didn't say anything, he called his colleagues to come and see. "Hurry up. Look at how tough our Damon was yesterday. He's the role model for cuckolds." Speaking of, He leaned over to look at the bruise at the corner of my mouth. What happened, Damon? Aren't you usually very tough? Why did you get beaten? As soon as I finished speaking, I punched him. The guy covered his face and fell on the table, knocking over a bunch of debris. Ping-pong sound. Fuck you. He cursed and I punched him again. He has been angry these past 2 days and he insisted on putting himself in the line of fire. I never hit a woman. Luckily, this chatterbox came over to me and allowed me to vent. He was holding on to the table and couldn't get up, but he was still cursing. I grabbed his collar and was about to hit him again, so my colleagues came over to separate them. Someone whispered in my ear, "Come on, don't be impulsive. His uncle is the manager. Have you forgotten?" Of course I didn't forget. But I'm so angry now that I can't control myself. Come on. I have a way out now. If I get fired, I will go back to taking over the nanny job that pays $200,000 a month. 11. Malcolm is just like his uncle. He is talkative and has no tolerance. In less than 2 hours, the manager came over. He made up an excuse and said that my plan was not good, and scolded me like a grandson in front of the whole office. Everyone knew that the so-called plan was just an excuse, and people were just venting their anger for their nephew. Taking a deep breath, I endured it, but he scolded my mother. I got so angry that I slammed the table and stood up, pointing my finger at him. "Are you going to curse me again?" The manager sneered. "I say, your mother must have slept with too many people, so she gave birth to a loser like you. What's wrong?" He actually repeated it. I picked up the water glass on the table and threw it hard at him. He dodged it, but he was obviously very scared. "Are you fucking sick? Right?" I walked towards him. "You are sick, so it is not against the law to beat you." The manager stepped back and said, "Believe it or not, I will fire you." Then he said in a cold voice, "You are fired. Pack up your things, go to the finance department to get your salary and get out." I laughed even more happily. "Since you've already been fired, let's go and settle our personal grudges first." When I was pulling the manager towards the stairwell, someone suddenly came over to inform me that the company's new boss had arrived. New boss? The manager was stunned for a moment, then quickly broke away from me and turned around to explain to everyone that the company had been acquired and the new boss would be our new boss. So everyone had to perform well. Just saying. People have already come in. Before the person arrived, the voice came first. "You are fired." "Why is it him?" When I heard his voice, my anus tightened. The manager was stunned for a moment, then replied with a smile, "Yes, boss. This kid doesn't know the rules. I have already fired him." "I mean you." Wesley came over, looked at the manager coldly, and said simply, "Pack your things and get out." The situation suddenly reversed. I stared at Wesley's profile. I have to admit, it feels pretty damn good to be protected by someone. 12. I was called into Wesley's office. He sat on the sofa and looked up at me. "Were you bullied?" "No." I frowned. "I'm going to be fired anyway. I'm going to beat that bastard to death." Wesley suddenly smiled. "Such a crappy company. And they still want to fire you. Isn't this considered bullying?" He patted the seat next to him. "Come here." I'm a little hesitant. "Don't go," he just backed me up. "Go ahead." I also feel like I'm a little lover kept by B. Grit your teeth and go sit down. There was a distance of half a person's width in between. Wesley spoke again. "Come closer." I moved closer to him again. As soon as I sat down, he pushed me down on the sofa. I thought he was going to kiss me forcibly, so I quickly covered my mouth. But in fact, people don't have that intention at all. He just leaned on the sofa and looked at me, asking, "Are you hiding from me?" "Without." "Are you afraid of me?" "Won't." His fingers ran into his hair, caressing it gently. Only then did I realize that the curtains were also drawn in his office. This person seems to like this dim environment very much. After looking at each other for a while, he asked again, "Have you thought about it?" "Without." "Think it over carefully," Wesley said, his voice a little hoarse. "I'm your boss now." I suddenly let go of her hand. "Are you threatening me?" Wesley didn't answer. The office was dark. He looked down at me, said nothing, but his Adam's apple rolled quietly. Too close. We were so close that I could feel the warmth of his breath. I felt inexplicably nervous. Just as I was about to push him away, Wesley took action before me, holding my wrist with one hand and clasping the back of my head with the other. The kiss came without warning. First it was a test, then a light taste, and then it suddenly intensified. Conquer cities and territories without leaving any room for them. I was so panicked that I bit him. Wesley was not annoyed, but instead he tightened his hands on the back of my head. Breathing staggered. I closed my eyes, but I could still see Wesley's face. 13. I compromised. I don't know what emotion I'm feeling now. Is it to take revenge on Sydney? Is it because I want Wesley's money? Or is it because of that accident that I'm really moved? I didn't understand my own heart, but somehow I compromised. Wesley pushed hard. He was decisive and never left any room for leeway. Don't leave any for others, and don't leave any for yourself. I always feel that he has a kind of ruthlessness, the kind that will not give up until he achieves his goal. I was forced to move into Wesley's house. The villa in the city center is 4 stories high and covers an area of more than 500 square meters. Moreover, it was not the Cheen family that they looked for last time, but Wesley's own residence. First day of stay. I was a little nervous, especially when it got dark, and I refused to go into the room. Wesley didn't rush me, but asked the nanny to cook a table of food, took 2 bottles of wine and asked me, "Want a couple of drinks?" Too nervous, drink something to relax. A little drink to relax you. However, I didn't expect Wesley to be so good at drinking. I was already dizzy from seeing people in pairs, but he could still pick up the peanuts with chopsticks accurately. He tilted his head to look at me. "Okay." I was stunned. What's up?" Perhaps because I was having trouble finding the right tone when I spoke, Wesley smiled and pulled me up from the table. "Let's go." "Where are you going?" Wesley dragged me into the elevator and said, "Go upstairs and go to bed." This person deliberately emphasized the pronunciation of the last 2 words. In the elevator, Wesley lowered his eyes to look at me, and suddenly he fell towards me. I was startled and caught him hastily. Wesley pressed on me, against the wall of the elevator, and the smell of sandalwood mixed with a hint of alcohol hit me in the face. I feel even more dizzy. Fortunately, at this time the elevator door opened. I quickly pushed Wesley out and followed him back to the room. The heavy curtains were still drawn in the room, and Wesley refused to turn on the lights. When I was lying in bed, I could only vaguely see his face. Maybe I was drunk, but at this moment, I played the emotional card. I looked into his eyes and asked softly, "Wesley, you've had sex with other men?" "No." He got a firm answer before he even finished asking the question. In the darkness, his eyes were as bright as stars. "Only with you. It's really embarrassing to say this. What about with girls?" "No." "None of them?" I'm a little skeptical. Wesley has very sharp eyes and can accurately capture my emotional changes even in the dark. He laughed. "Don't believe it? You can check. I've never been around anyone, and I've never had any scandals." "Why?" Given Wesley's family background and appearance, there are countless people, both men and women, who want to get into his bed. This time, Wesley didn't answer me right away. In the darkness, a fire suddenly lit up. He lit a cigarette, and after a while he whispered, "I have no desire in the past. I don't quite understand." He smiled and said, "In other words, in the past, I had no physical reaction to anyone. You can understand it as indifference." I swallowed. "For me, I took his cigarette and suppressed the chaotic thoughts in my mind. "But the last time you were with me, it was because someone tampered with your wine." Wesley lit up another cigarette, the flame illuminating his face. "But last time at your house, I didn't drink, and no one did anything to me." I thought about it carefully. "No, bro, we just sat and chatted at my house last time. You too?" He deserves to have no shame." My face was burning badly. After a while, I calmed down a little and wanted to ask again, but Wesley frowned and put out his cigarette. A little impatient, he said, "I don't want to talk anymore. I can't help it." Sydney, be the fuck gentler. 14. Our company originally did not allow office romances, but my boss and I started a secret relationship. Over time, my mentality has changed. When I heard the young girls in the company talking about Wesley in an excited tone, praising him for being rich and handsome, I couldn't help but think, handsome, right? My own. This idea is dangerous. But I can't stop it. After following Wesley for a month, I received an invitation to a class reunion. I didn't want to go, but Troy accepted it for me. In Troy's words, "You have money and a good figure, what's the difference? Come on, I'll go with you to fight that couple." Troy is also our college classmate. He just dropped out of school in his freshman year because of fighting. They were all classmates, and he knew Sydney, but he just didn't like her very much. Troy has been around for a long time and knows people well. He told me a long time ago that Sydney is an unreliable woman. If I give her a choice, she will kick me at any time. It's a pity that I didn't believe it at the time. Class reunion. Troy and I went together. As soon as I walked in, I saw Sydney, who was the center of attention, and her newlywed husband who was a perfect match for her. All classmates know that Sydney is no longer the same as before. She is now the real daughter of a wealthy man and married to a rich second-generation man. She has become a wealthy wife. He is the one that everyone is eager to curry favor with. As soon as I walked in, everyone's faces became excited. Rich people never lack lackeys. As soon as they met, someone immediately started to speak up. "Damon is here. I heard that you were drunk and made a scene at the wedding and were dragged out by the security guards and beaten half to death. Well, if you ask me, it's better for everyone if we part ways amicably. You said you embarrassed yourself because of your impulsiveness, but why bother?" That is. Someone responded, "It's only because Sydney and her husband are generous and don't bother with you. Otherwise, a restless ex-boyfriend like you would have been scolded to death by others." I frowned, but before I could say anything, Troy next to me exploded. "Can you talk? Come on. Let's see who dares to poke Damon in the spine. That bitch Sydney is two-timing. On the morning of our wedding, she even called me her bro baby. Isn't she disgusting?" Sydney's expression changed instantly when Troy spoke. She tugged at the sleeve of the man next to her. "Grant, don't listen to his nonsense. They are just a bunch of scoundrels, always blaming others for their mistakes. At the beginning, He started to choke up after saying less than 2 sentences. It's a waste of her talent if she doesn't go into acting. However, her husband Grant was obviously very impressed by this. He immediately lowered his head to comfort her and then walked towards me. "Are you Damon?" "Yes." I looked calmly into his eyes. Grant suddenly came over and sniffed me. When Troy and I were confused, he suddenly asked the people around him, "Do you smell anything?" Everyone was very cooperative and asked what it smelled like. He laughed and covered his nose with his hand. "It smells like migrant workers." Everyone burst into laughter. Grant pulled out his wallet, pulled out a bank card, and threw it directly at me. "Okay, kid. Didn't you just support her part-time when you were in school? How much money can you make carrying bricks in a year on a construction site? I'll pay you back for her." I looked at him coldly. Troy bent over and picked up the bank card thrown at my feet and laughed. "It's not even a black card. Why are you pretending to be so high-handed? Let me guess how much money is in there. Tens of thousands?" Grant sneered. $100,000. Is that enough to pay back? Troy nearly died of laughter. $100,000, you make it sound like you're talking about 100 million. I mean, man, what kind of pretense are you making with just $100,000? As he said that, he smashed the bank card back into Grant's face. "You took on a shitty deal, and you feel so superior?" 15. The class reunion ended up in chaos. Grant was hit in the corner of his eye by a bank card and cursed Troy angrily, using very dirty words. Finally, I pinned him to the ground and beat him up. Not only did he snatch the person from me, but he also scolded my brother. What a bastard. At first glance, this man is a young man from a wealthy family. He has a body full of flesh and no strength at all. After 2 punches, he fell to the ground and couldn't get up. So boring. Wesley is still strong. After smashing the class reunion, Troy and I tried to leave, but were stopped and forced to pay compensation. I took out my wallet, took out all the money, didn't count it, estimated it was several thousand, and threw it on the table. Is that all? No. The hotel refused to let us leave, saying that we had smashed an antique vase in the hotel when we started fighting. Antique? Troy pointed to the broken modern vase on the ground. Are you okay? After arguing for a while, we found out that Grant was a shareholder of this hotel. No wonder. It turned out that it was not the antiques that were smashed, but the shareholders who were beaten by us. When the situation was at a stalemate, Wesley's voice came from outside the room. Let them go. When the hotel manager saw him, he immediately stepped forward and spoke in a very respectful tone. From what he said, it turned out that Wesley was also a shareholder here, and the largest shareholder. Wesley's arrival made the atmosphere suddenly tense. Everyone was talking in low voices. Everyone was just rushing to compliment Sydney, and everyone thought that Wesley was there to stand up for his sister. Until he stood beside me. His eyes swept over me, finally landing on my slightly red fist. I grabbed my wrist and looked up. Wesley said to me, I'll assign you 2 bodyguards. If this happens again, don't do it yourself. I was about to speak when I turned my head and suddenly realized that everyone was looking at me, the kind that is stunned. After realizing what was happening, I abruptly pulled my hand away. Wesley looked at me, turned around, and looked at Grant across from him. When he looked at him, Grant's original arrogance instantly disappeared. He smiled, obviously with a hint of flattery. Brother, why are you here? Wesley gave a look and a bodyguard immediately came forward to light a cigarette. He held a cigarette between his legs and looked at Grant, who was not far away. If I don't come soon, you will detain my people. The words "my people" instantly pushed the atmosphere to a climax. Everyone was looking at me, shocked and stunned. As for why it was me, I guess everyone is thinking, it can't be Troy who weighs more than 200 pounds next to me. Grant was stunned for 2 seconds, then immediately changed his tone, saying something about a flood that had flushed the Dragon King Temple, and that we were all family. He then immediately apologized to me with a very hypocritical smile. Damon, why didn't you tell me about your relationship with my brother earlier? It turns out we're all family. He laughed dryly, obviously embarrassed. I was too lazy to pay attention to this fence-sitter and turned to leave, but I heard Sydney's voice behind me. Brother, what's your relationship with Damon? This is my ex-boyfriend. Do you want to make him your boyfriend too? She has known about our relationship for a long time, and she asked loudly this time, definitely on purpose for everyone to hear. I glanced at Wesley subconsciously. The man had a calm expression as he stood beside me. He raised his hand and placed it on my shoulder. I took a deep breath, ready for him to expose me. You can call me your lover, boyfriend, or girlfriend. But 2 seconds later, Wesley's voice was heard in the private room. His tone was unusually serious. I'm Damon's suitor, 16. The way people looked at me changed again and again, from the initial contempt to the ambiguity and speculation after Wesley appeared, and then to the shock at this moment. Wesley's word, suitor, instantly raised my status many times. The man who was blessed by heaven was, at this moment, willing to put himself in a low position just to give me all the respect. He really does. This stuff is really good at winning people's hearts. At least I, a grown man, couldn't resist it and was deeply moved. As soon as these words were spoken, everyone's expression changed. Someone who is good at understanding immediately changed his attitude and talked to me. Damon, when they said that to you just now, I thought it was too much. Ignore them. They are a bunch of sycophants. They can't tell right from wrong just because of Sydney's status as a young lady. That's right. I've always felt that Damon isn't the type to keep pestering people. Yes, I think so too. Everyone changed their attitude and spoke to me in a flattering tone. I'm not stupid, so of course I know they are doing it for Wesley, who is next to me. But I suddenly felt extremely bored. This group of people are more hypocritical than each other. I tugged at Wesley's sleeve and told Troy to leave, without responding to any of them. A bunch of fence sitters. After we got out of the door, Wesley got in the car first, leaving Troy and I some space to talk. At the hotel entrance, Troy's hands were shaking as he lit a cigarette. "You and Wesley?" My face felt a little hot, but I still gritted my teeth and admitted, "Yes, it's the kind of relationship you think it is." Troy took a puff of his cigarette and was stunned. After a long pause, he could only utter "awesome." I was suddenly a little afraid that Troy would look at me strangely, but after waiting for a long time, he just asked me quietly, "Does it hurt?" I was choked by the smoke and said, "Get lost." His face fell. "Your grandson is really down there." After taking 2 steps forward, he asked me again, "Is there anyone like Wesley who can introduce one to me?" I patted his belly, and his fat flesh trembled. "Lose some weight first, and I'll introduce you to a bunch of things." Troy laughed. "Fuck." While we were chatting and laughing, I finally put my mind at ease. Fine. My only brother doesn't treat me differently because of my relationship problems. After separating from Troy, I got into Wesley's car. The air conditioning in the car was on low, and it was a bit cold. When I reached out to adjust the temperature, my wrist was grabbed. "Look up." Wesley was looking at me, an unlit cigarette between his fingers, and asked, "What are you talking about?" I was stunned for a moment, and then he added, "You laughed so happily." It was then that I realized he was asking me and Troy. Our eyes met. Wesley's facial expression was slightly tense, and he was waiting for my answer very seriously. I couldn't help but be amused by him. "No way, are you jealous of Troy?" "I'm not very popular, he's my only brother," and pinched his abs. "Troy isn't my type when it comes to relationships." Wesley said nothing. The corners of his mouth couldn't help but rise a little. This person, although he looks indifferent, is actually very easy to coax. Moreover, he refuses to say anything even after being coaxed. He is very reserved. 17. As spring passed and autumn came, Wesley took me back home. To be honest, I'm a little nervous. I've heard before that his house is not easy to enter. I changed into formal clothes and carried the gifts I had prepared in advance. When I saw his parents, I greeted them calmly. The other party nodded slightly, responded, and asked me to sit down. Not enthusiastic, but didn't embarrass me either. This makes me a little unsure of their attitude. Everything was relatively normal during the meal. His daughter Fiona, who was adopted by mistake for more than 20 years, was also there. Although they were not related by blood, they had lived together for more than 20 years and had a deep affection for each other. So even after Sydney was taken home, he did not chase her away. Fiona has a very good personality, she is not arrogant, and she is gentle and generous. Thanks to her constant efforts to adjust the atmosphere at the dinner table was relatively harmonious. Apart from Sydney. When she heard that Wesley brought me home, she went back to her parents' home. At the dinner table, she kept belittling me in her words. She said she was my college classmate and deliberately brought up the times when I skipped classes to work part-time and on construction sites. They were a wealthy family and they valued family background. The relationship between Wesley and I was already considered an anomaly in the eyes of others, and when she repeatedly brought up the time when I was a part-time migrant worker, I guess my impression of her would continue to decline. But I can't fight back. I endured it all. But Wesley couldn't stand it. He peeled a shrimp for me and put it on the plate, wiped his hands and said calmly, "Everything she said was true. Damon worked various part-time jobs in college. However, there is one part she didn't tell you. Damon did all this to earn money to support her, your good daughter." When his parents were shocked, Wesley said, "Damon was Sydney's boyfriend. They dated for 4 years, but he foolishly worked as a laborer to support her. In the end, he found out his girlfriend was married without even saying goodbye. We met at a wedding." Wesley looked at me and added, "He was originally straight, but I bent him, as if he was worried that his parents would not agree." He put down his chopsticks and added, "You may not agree, but I will give up my inheritance and take him away, or I will stay with you and fulfill my filial duties. but I will never fall in love and live alone until the end of my life." His parents looked at him quietly. No one knows their children better than their parents. They must know Wesley's temper better than I do. If he said he would die alone, then he would really die alone. Within 2 minutes of the stalemate, the two elders agreed. His mother sighed and poured me a cup of tea herself. "Don't worry. Since we let you bring him home, it means we approve of him. You have been sexually insatiable since childhood. You are almost 30 years old now. With such good conditions, you have never been in a relationship. Your father and I were so worried. Later, we figured it out. As long as we can meet someone we like, it doesn't matter if they are rich or poor, tall or short, or even male or female. As long as we can meet them, it's fine." It seems that Wesley has indeed put a lot of pressure on his parents over the years. After things were talked out, the atmosphere eased. During the meal, we would occasionally chat. After dinner, Wesley went to the bathroom and I went for a walk in the backyard alone. When I was taking pictures of the garden with my phone, I heard footsteps behind me. I thought it was Wesley, but when I turned around, I found it was Sydney. She drank some wine at the dinner table, and now she came here reeking of alcohol. "Damon." Her eyes were red and her voice was choked with sobs. "Are you really going to be with my brother?" "Actually." She suddenly came forward and hugged me. "I regret it." I pushed her away expressionlessly. "Don't do this. I'm your sister-in-law." Sydney's movements froze, but she came closer and said, "Don't fool yourself. You don't like men at all. You are with my brother just to be close to me, right?" "Damon, I always think of our past. I used to think that bread was more important than love, and that poor couples have many sorrows. But now I realize that a marriage with only money and no love is even more tragic." I pushed her away again and again, but she kept coming closer. "I missed you so much. She is so annoying." I resisted the urge to kick her away, and just as I was about to push her away again, the door to the back garden suddenly opened. Wesley and Sheen's parents appeared at the door. As soon as my hand reached out, I pushed Sydney away. Everything is just right. It was more like I was feeling guilty. So I pushed Sydney away from my embrace the moment the door opened. Facing the gazes of the three people, Sydney slapped me almost instantly. "Damon." Her voice trembled. "We are over. I am Wesley's sister. Are you doing this to Wesley?" "TSK." I frowned at her, suddenly feeling sick for the past 4 years of my youth. Pa. I couldn't help but clap my hands. "If we weren't college classmates, I would have suspected that your major in college was face-changing." With that, I walked over to Wesley and played the video. I happened to be recording the garden when Sydney came in, so I didn't even turn off the video to prevent her from saying something irrelevant. The conversation we just had was clearly heard by Wesley and the other two. "Damon, are you really going to be with my brother?" "Actually, I regret it. Don't be like that. I'm your sister-in-law." Sydney's face turned pale. "Teen, Wesley and I are surprisingly harmonious. Troy lost weight from 220 pounds to 160 pounds, but the relationship between Wesley and I didn't fade at all. Sydney, on the other hand, has accumulated a group of fans and become a well-known internet celebrity by relying on her persona as a rich girl and making bold revelations on the internet. Having tasted the taste of a little fame, Sydney became even crazier. He used his identity to get involved in the entertainment industry, find out all kinds of private information, and then boldly revealed it. This action offended a lot of people, and her parents had to clean up the mess for her a lot. Thanks to his bold revelations, Sydney's fan base soared. However, 1 year after becoming famous, someone suddenly broke the news online. Sydney is divorced. As far as I know, Grant's family had some problems last year and they barely managed to survive until last year, but finally went bankrupt. Some netizens revealed that Sydney's husband's family went bankrupt and she filed for divorce, but ended up being abused several times. I heard that the beating was pretty bad. As soon as the news was released, someone immediately hired an army of internet trolls to repost it on a large scale, and the comments section was filled with applause and people saying that the person deserved it. As for who bought the Navy, no one knows. Sydney has offended so many people in the past that it is impossible to trace them all. When I saw this news, I just glanced at it casually, swiped away, and sighed that it served me right. I thought Sydney would stop there and go back to her parents' home to be a carefree parasite and live off her parents for the rest of her life. However, a piece of news that came out later made my scalp tingle. After seeing the news, I hurried to ask Wesley and got confirmation from him. Wesley lit a cigarette and sighed. Sydney lived at home after her divorce. She felt that her parents were closer to Fiona, so she got jealous and lied to her about going on a trip. She was kidnapped at night and taken to Burma. My parents later personally brought people over, paid the money, and brought people back. If they were a step later, Fiona would have been. I was worried about her when I heard that. Fine. The gentle and kind-hearted girl was not harmed by the bad guys. However, not long after, Cheen's parents sent someone to investigate and got some unexpected news. The people who kidnapped them, Sydney found it. Everything was a play by Sydney. She originally wanted Fiona to die there. In order to dispel his parents' doubts, he asked the other party to tie him up as well. Only at this moment did I realize just how evil this woman was. It's not surprising that such a person would abandon me for money. After this incident, Cheen's parents were finally completely disappointed. Wesley lit a cigarette and sighed. Although she has our blood in her veins, she is terribly evil at heart. My parents finally got disappointed and kicked her out of the house. She has been living abroad for so many years. She can be stupid and not very good. We will tolerate her unconditionally. But she can't be so bad. I snatched Wesley's cigarette, took a drag, and nodded. Really? Now think about it. A blessed man will not marry an unblessed woman. After thinking it over again, I put out the cigarette, turned over and pressed Wesley under me. Wesley was stunned for a moment, and then alerted. What? You? I licked my lips. Will you let me try? Roll. Wesley didn't know where he got the strength from. It was terrifying. He pushed me down and took the initiative. I bit my lip tightly. Brother, I'm just kidding. It's too late. This guy is always a man of action. As soon as I finished speaking, he took off my pants. Wesley. Elder brother. Dad. 19. Wesley and I are planning a trip to Ireland. Go get a marriage certificate. The day before departure, Wesley worked all night at the company. I was hungry at night, so I went out for some skewers. But suddenly he was blocked outside his house. It's Sydney. She was wearing a dark-colored outfit of unknown brand. Her hair was disheveled, and she looked haggard. Took me several glances to recognize it. She had been drinking and smelled strongly of alcohol. Damon. As she spoke, her eyes turned red. How are you doing? I held the half-burnt cigarette in my hand and took a puff. Not bad. Do you really love my brother? When I put the word Wesley and the word love together, I was dazed for a moment. At first, I couldn't accept it. But later, I gradually felt that it was natural that Wesley and I were together because we liked each other, because we were in love with each other, and because of the desire that quietly grew when we faced each other. This is love, isn't it? When I came to my senses, I realized that I was thinking of Wesley, and my expression seemed a little too gentle. Really. When I looked up, I realized that Sydney was looking at me with an extremely desperate look. She didn't even need me to answer, my reaction said it all. In our city, it's early winter and light snow is already falling. She looked at me from half a meter away, her eyes red, and tried to hold my hand. Damon, please stop fooling yourself. Okay? I know you don't like money. I don't want a comfortable life anymore. Let's make peace. Okay? Let's get married and have a lovely daughter like we talked about in the past. Okay? She asked cautiously, looking haggard and withered. But I refused without any hesitation. How is that possible? I was very direct. I don't like women anymore. Besides, I put out my cigarette and said sincerely, You're already married for the second time. Why are you still dreaming of finding a young man like me who has never been married? Sydney's eyes were red and she was speechless. I walked past her and headed towards the barbecue stall. I have been eating at this restaurant for more than 10 years and the food is delicious. Even though I am rich now, this store is still my favorite. Wesley, who never ate at small restaurants in the past, now often changes into casual clothes and sits with me in food stalls to eat skewers and drink beer, especially down to earth. Boss, 2 skewers of chicken wings, 10 skewers of beef. After ordering some, I suddenly missed Wesley. So I took out my phone and called him. I'm at the barbecue stall. What do you want to eat? Chicken wings? Barbecue? Would you like a drink? On the other end of the phone, Wesley was silent for 2 seconds with a smile in his tone. Have a drink. There's wine in the office. Then he started ordering dishes. Grilled oysters, grilled leeks. All of them are very nutritious. The more I listen, the more my butt hurts.